What's happening, everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving deep into what could be one of the most significant diplomatic moments of 2025 so far. President Donald Trump is set to meet with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland this Thursday, and the implications of this meeting extend far beyond a simple handshake. This isn't just another bilateral meeting on the sidelines of a global summit. This is a conversation that could reshape the trajectory of one of the most devastating conflicts of our time, the war in Ukraine, and potentially redefine America's role on the world stage. So grab your coffee, settle in, and let's break down everything you need to know about this historic meeting. Background: the road to Davos. To understand why this meeting matters so much, we need to rewind a bit. Donald Trump returned to the White House on January 20th, 2025, and from day one, he made it clear that ending the war in Ukraine was a top priority. During his campaign, Trump repeatedly claimed he could end the conflict in 24 hours, a bold statement that drew both praise and skepticism from foreign policy experts around the world. Now, let's be real here. Anyone who's followed this conflict knows that a 24-hour solution was always more campaign rhetoric than realistic policy. The war in Ukraine has been raging since Russia's full-scale invasion in February 2022, claiming hundreds of thousands of lives, displacing millions, and fundamentally altering the European security landscape. But the fact that Trump made this promise tells us something important. He sees ending this war as a defining achievement of his second term. On the other side of this meeting sits Volodymyr Zelenskyy, a man who has become the face of Ukrainian resistance. Once a comedian and actor, Zelenskyy has transformed into a wartime leader who has rallied international support, secured billions in military aid, and kept Ukraine fighting against what many thought would be a quick Russian victory. He's addressed parliaments, met with world leaders, and become a symbol of democratic resilience. But here's where things get complicated. Trump and Zelenskyy haven't always seen eye to eye. During Trump's first term, Ukraine was at the center of Trump's first impeachment related to a controversial phone call where Trump allegedly pressured Zelenskyy to investigate the Biden family. And during the recent campaign, Trump made comments suggesting he had a good relationship with Vladimir Putin and questioned the levels of U.S. aid flowing to Ukraine, which reportedly worried Zelenskyy and his team. The Davos setting. So why Davos? Why now? The World Economic Forum is one of those unique gatherings where heads of state, business leaders, and influential figures from across the globe converge in this Swiss alpine resort town. It's both a summit and a stage, a place where deals get made and messages get sent to the world. Trump's schedule at Davos this week has been packed. On Wednesday, he held bilateral meetings with NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, as well as the leaders of Poland, Belgium, and Egypt. Each of these meetings carries its own significance. Poland and Belgium are NATO allies with strong views on supporting Ukraine and maintaining European security. Egypt plays a crucial role in Middle Eastern stability, and Mark Rutte, as NATO's chief, represents the alliance that has been Ukraine's security backbone throughout this conflict. The meeting with Zelenskyy is scheduled for Thursday, and it's strategically placed after a Gaza Board of Peace event. That's interesting timing because it shows Trump is trying to position himself as a peacemaker on multiple fronts simultaneously. He's not just focused on Ukraine, he's also dealing with the ongoing situation in Gaza, which erupted into major conflict in late 2023. The optics matter here. By meeting these leaders at Davos, Trump is sending a message that America is back at the center of global diplomacy, that he's the deal-maker who can broker peace where others have failed. Whether that message resonates will depend heavily on what comes out of Thursday's meeting. What's at stake? Let's talk about what's actually on the table here, because this isn't just a photo opportunity. The war in Ukraine has reached a critical juncture. Russia controls roughly 20% of Ukrainian territory, including Crimea, which it annexed back in 2014, and large portions of the Donbas region in eastern Ukraine. The front lines have been largely static for months, with both sides suffering devastating casualties in brutal trench warfare that historians have compared to World War I. For Zelenskyy, this meeting presents both opportunity and risk. The opportunity is clear. If he can secure Trump's commitment to continued U.S. ADS military and financial support, Ukraine can maintain its defensive capabilities and potentially launch new offensives to reclaim territory. The United States has been Ukraine's largest supporter, providing tens of billions of dollars in military aid, intelligence sharing, and diplomatic backing. But here's the risk. Trump has repeatedly expressed skepticism about the scale of U.S. involvement in Ukraine. He's questioned why European nations aren't doing more, argued that America is spending too much on foreign conflicts, and suggested that a deal could be reached quickly if both sides were willing to negotiate. For Zelenskyy, the fear is that Trump might push for a settlement that forces Ukraine to give up territory or make concessions that would essentially reward Russian aggression. From Trump's perspective, this meeting is a chance to demonstrate his negotiating prowess. He wants to be seen as the president who ended a major war, boosting his legacy and potentially freeing up resources for domestic priorities. But he also faces pressure from Republican hawks in Congress who strongly support Ukraine, as well as from NATO allies who fear that any sign of American wavering could embolden Putin and undermine European security. The stakes extend beyond just Ukraine and Russia. China is watching closely to see how America handles this situation, as it bears on Beijing's calculations regarding Taiwan. North Korea, Iran, and other authoritarian states are assessing whether aggression pays off in the modern world order, and America's credibility as a security guarantor hangs in the balance. The European dimension. We can't talk about this meeting without addressing the elephant in the room: Europe. European nations have poured enormous resources into supporting Ukraine, both in military aid and in absorbing millions of Ukrainian refugees. Countries like Poland, the Baltic states, and Finland, which share borders or historical tensions with Russia, see Ukraine's fight as existential for their own security. But Europe is also divided. While the Eastern European nations have been steadfast in their support, some Western European countries have been more cautious, particularly when it comes to providing long-range weapons that could strike deep into Russian territory. Germany, Europe's largest economy, has been criticized for being too slow to deliver heavy weapons, though it has significantly increased its defense spending. Trump's meeting with the Polish, Belgian, and NATO leaders before sitting down with Zelenskyy is significant. He's essentially getting Europe's perspective before engaging with Ukraine directly. Poland's president, in particular, has been one of Ukraine's strongest advocates, and Belgian leadership represents the EU's institutional voice, as Brussels is the de facto capital of European Union governance. The question European leaders are asking is this: will Trump try to broker a deal over their heads, or will he work in concert with European allies? Throughout his political career, Trump has been skeptical of multilateral alliances and has preferred bilateral deal-making. This approach worries European leaders who fear being sidelined in negotiations that directly affect their security. Mark Rutte, the NATO Secretary General, plays a crucial role here. He's the one who has to maintain alliance unity while dealing with an American president who has previously questioned NATO's value and suggested the U.S. might not defend allies who don't meet defense spending targets. Rutte's message to Trump likely emphasized that NATO unity is essential and that any Ukraine settlement must be acceptable to European allies. Possible outcomes. So, what might actually come out of Thursday's meeting? Let's walk through a few scenarios, keeping in mind that diplomacy at this level often produces more questions. Scenario 1. The commitment: Trump could use this meeting to reaffirm strong U.S. support for Ukraine, pledging continued military aid and backing Ukraine's position that any peace deal must include the restoration of its territorial integrity. This would reassure European allies and put pressure on Russia, but it would also mean prolonging a costly conflict with no clear end in sight. Scenario 2. The pressure campaign: Trump might tell Zelenskyy privately that U.S. patience and resources aren't unlimited and that Ukraine needs to be realistic about what it can achieve militarily. He could push for negotiations with Russia, suggesting that some territorial compromises might be necessary for peace. This would be a tough sell to Zelenskyy and would risk fracturing the Western coalition. Scenario 3. The grand bargain Trump could propose a comprehensive deal involving not just Ukraine and Russia, but broader European security arrangements, potentially including Ukraine's path to NATO or EU membership, security guarantees from multiple nations, and economic reconstruction packages. This would be ambitious, but extremely difficult to achieve given Russian intransigence. Scenario 4. The status quo. The two leaders could have a cordial meeting, express mutual respect, and commit to staying in close contact while kicking any major decisions down the road. This would disappoint those hoping for dramatic breakthroughs, but might be the most realistic outcome given the complexity of the situation. My gut tells me we're looking at something between scenarios 3 and 4. Trump will want to show he's actively working toward peace, so we'll likely hear about some kind of diplomatic framework or negotiating track. But the actual details will remain vague because both sides are still far apart on fundamental issues. One thing to watch for is Trump's language about Putin. During his campaign, Trump said he had a good relationship with the Russian president and could talk to him. If Trump comes out of the Zelenskyy meeting talking about calling Putin or arranging a three-way negotiation, that would signal he's serious about pushing for a near-term settlement. Remember, this meeting comes right after a Gaza Board of Peace event. That's not coincidental. Trump is trying to position himself as a global peacemaker, working on multiple conflicts simultaneously. The situation in Gaza, which erupted after Hamas's attack on Israel in October 2023, has become another defining crisis of this era. By juxtaposing these two conflicts, Trump may be trying to show that American leadership is essential for resolving global disputes. But it's also a risky strategy because both conflicts are incredibly complex, with deeply entrenched positions on all sides. Failure on either front could undermine Trump's credibility on both. There's also a resource question here. American attention, diplomatic capital, and military aid are finite. The more the U.S. commits to supporting Israel in Gaza, the less might be available for Ukraine. Congressional Republicans are generally supportive of both efforts, but there are limits to what the American public will accept in terms of foreign engagement, especially when there are pressing domestic concerns. Now, you might be thinking, why should I care about a meeting between two presidents in a Swiss ski resort? Fair question. But this meeting has real implications for all of us, regardless of where we live. First, there's the direct economic impact. The war in Ukraine has disrupted global food supplies since Ukraine is a major wheat exporter. It's affected energy prices, particularly in Europe, which was heavily dependent on Russian gas. And it's contributed to inflation worldwide as supply chains have been disrupted and defense spending has increased. Second, there's the bigger question of world order. If aggression succeeds in Ukraine, it sets a precedent that might makes right, that borders can be changed by force, and that international law is optional. This affects not just Ukraine, but every small nation that relies on international norms for protection against larger neighbors. Third, there's the nuclear dimension. Russia has made veiled threats about using nuclear weapons if it faces military defeat. This is the closest we've come to nuclear conflict since the Cold War, and how Trump and other Western leaders handle this situation could determine whether we maintain the nuclear taboo that has held since 1945. And finally, there's the fundamental question of what kind of world we want to live in. Do we support democracies against authoritarian aggression, even when it's costly and difficult? Or do we prioritize short-term peace and economic stability, even if it means accepting outcomes we find morally troubling? These aren't easy questions, and Thursday's meeting is one small piece of how we collectively answer them. So there you have it. Thursday's meeting between Trump and Zelenskyy in Davos is far more than just another diplomatic encounter. It's a moment where America's role in the world, Ukraine's future, and potentially the trajectory of international relations will be shaped. We'll be watching closely for any statements, press conferences, or readouts from this meeting. The devil will be in the details: what specific commitments are made, what language is used about territorial integrity and Russian aggression, and what signals are sent about the future of U.S. support. One thing is certain: this meeting won't resolve the war in Ukraine, but it could set the stage for how the conflict evolves over the coming months. Whether Trump emerges as a peacemaker or whether this becomes just another chapter in an ongoing tragedy remains to be seen. Thanks for watching. And if you found this analysis helpful, please hit that like button and subscribe for more in-depth coverage of global events. Drop a comment below with your thoughts on what you think will happen at this meeting. I read every comment, and your perspectives help shape future videos. Until next time, stay informed, stay engaged, and remember that these global events affect all of us in ways big and small. Take care.